This is San Francisco.
This is San Francisco, and for this episode, we are taking the Willie L. Brown Jr. Bridge to the Bay Bridge and down the I-80 all the way to Oakland, where, as the pandemic began, the Oakland Unified School District announced plans to close
24 schools in total.
All over the U.S., there's a push to close public schools in favor of private schools and charter schools where kids have to apply to get in. And it's all part of a very clear attempt to segregate schools according to generational wealth. Our visitors today in San Francisco are Chelsea Carl, or Ms. Carl, a local teacher and friend of mine, and one of Ms. Carl's students, Daniel. They were two out of hundreds of people who showed up unpaid for months to occupy and turn one of the schools that had just been closed, Parker Elementary in Oakland, into a working community-run school where there were volunteer teachers, a 24/7 security team to ward off cops who were constantly threatening to shut down the school. And the school was run by the community for months. But eventually the city and the cops came in to shut Parker down late last year. But for the months while it was run by the community, it showed the possibility of schools that are centered around the actual students. In this conversation, we talk about a lot of things that could be their own episodes, including how you run a school when the local government wants to see you fail, and how the Oakland Teachers Union caved to a corrupt school board that serves real estate developers more than students, handing off contracts to build like half of a school campus that in the end never opened, and a lot more.
Could I have you, Chelsea, introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I am a teacher in Oakland. And I found out about Parker through one of my housemates who is involved in another organization, and they were kind of like helping out at Parker and told me about it. And I was like, oh, that's cute. That's going to get shut down soon. Then like once they said that, yeah, people are camping out there and it's like legit and they're having a barbecue, you should go. Then I got a little bit peripherally involved.
Daniel, would you be down to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Daniel. I'm just a student. I got introduced to Parker through Miss Carl, and it was pretty cool, man. Like, she invited me first, and I was like, that's nice. And like, at first it was just like a barbecue. We just went there. And that same day we were invited to be like security for that same night. So I guess that's my role. On like the whole Parker situation, it was more like security.
Security, what did that involve, and why did it feel like there was a need for security?
Well, the main issue over there was like we were worried that people would like lock the fences and not allow people to go in because, like Toshi said earlier, they were occupying it. It was like a community school, like people that were willing to like help out, did help out. It was awesome. And like the risk at night was like the cops would come by, and, you know, some other precautions we took were like putting bags over the cameras, you know, making sure everything was cleaning out the schools, you know. There were like these abandoned rooms that had books and stuff and like little backpacks. It was so awesome. Mm-hmm. And you were offered food, like you weren't starving either. They're like fridge fulls of food. Mm-hmm. It was cool. It was a very good experience. My role was like not that big compared to like the people who are running it.
Yeah.
I forgot the mom of that place.
As Lena. Do you remember?
Yeah. As Lena, yeah. She was so cool, man. And she was like supporting everything. So yeah, that's me.
People also fell into the many roles that were needed during, I mean, it's basically like running a school on your own.
Yeah.
Because both the school board and the local government institutions, including the police, including City Hall, were not stoked about this happening.
And even during security, like schooling was happening.
Yeah.
I remember our first security night, you were talking to some dude from like Seattle.
Yeah.
And you had come late because your brother was like going through it. So your nephew was going through it. So your aunt was like, well, why don't we just like break some glass? Like just like get out some frustration. So you came a little late. And so you were just like talking about different ways to get out your anger. And then he was just like, that's all good. But like, you should also like get to the root of why you're so angry. And you were like, whoa. And I was like, whoa, you're just like
It was super cool. We also
getting some like mental health.
We talked about redlining that night. We talked about history. We talked about a lot of stuff. It was super cool. It was like our own little podcast. We should record it.
It really was like a podcast. I was just laying in a tent nearby and I felt like I was listening to him.
All those people were awesome, man. Like everybody I met there, like nobody was bad there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everybody was really cool, very nice. They all were just a part of one cause, and like we just talk about like how it wasn't just that the schools just closed down. It's like they just decide this is deeper than that. You know, redlining is all a part of like the same situation. You know, and it's all we were just talking about how it's all just connected, and that was also really cool. We just dug deep into like the situation, not just like the people want to close it down, like the rich people. You know, it's deeper in that street.
Yeah.
Chelsea, you started teaching back in 2018. That was the same school year when the Oakland Unified Public Schools Board, and usually these boards are filled with people who are there to make a political career. They're not necessarily teachers or students or even parents necessarily. Like they are on this board in order to gain some political clout. Mm-hmm. Like they don't necessarily care about the schools. In 2018, there were some, budget issues based on the Unified School District of Oakland was kind of a mess because there had been a lot of corruption locally, like a lot of embezzling, siphoning of money, like into projects. This actually happens more than I think a lot of people realize, into dead end building and construction projects for, friends of principal at some school somewhere or superintendent of some school somewhere. And so the people that end up paying the price for this embezzlement, it's not the people on the school board generally who are making a lot of the decisions like, all right, we're going to close this many schools. I was wondering, like if you could kind of set the scene a little bit, 2018, when you just started teaching.
So, I was in public school. I was student teaching with a cooperating teacher who was at public high school. It was great. I was teaching after school and then pursued a career in education because I did want to be in a union and wanted to feel like I had agency as a worker. My cooperating teacher was really, really involved in the union. Not to say that public schools are the best, because this school definitely has some issues, mainly because of the way that they navigate money. This year, one of the teachers told me that they didn't have running water at this school, and they still made the kids come into school for a whole school day. No running water, no flushed poops or anything, no washed hands. But this teacher was really, really involved in the union. So in January of 2019, after a lot of planning and organizing to do so, the teachers in the Oakland Unified School District went on strike. It was really dope. Like a lot of students were involved. And so one demand that my cooperating teacher told me this was a demand, and I was like, that's absurd, was that in Oakland schools, you get money, your school gets money, and you have to divvy out a certain portion to the classrooms for the students to learn, like textbooks, computers, whatever, actual maintenance of the classroom. If you don't allocate all of those funds to the classroom, you have to pay a fine. So say you're an administrator and you want like more money for a pizza party, I don't even know, or your Mercedes-Benz, whatever. Then you just pay a fine. So you can take way more money from the classrooms and pay a smaller fine. And so that was a thing that's happening at public schools. And so one of the demands was like, you shouldn't be able to do this. Like,
right. So ultimately, it's not hurting that administrator who decides to spend it on what they're going to spend it on, including
their own parking tickets or
Yeah.
something, whatever.
Then people are like looking at Oakland schools like the quality of education is so bad, we need to close it. And it's like, well, if the funds weren't being fucking
Second off.
Yeah. That was one demand, which no mention in the resolution of that one. But then some of the other demands were that teachers should get paid 12% more over the following 3 years, that they would cap class sizes at way lower than they were, which, just to give you an idea, my cooperating teacher, her biggest class in a portable classroom, which is tiny, had like 30 students. But then the teacher next door was also teaching in a portable, and he had like a high 40s amount of students in the classroom who were like, there was not enough desks for them, but they were like sitting on like swivelly chairs and sitting on like the counter in the back of the room, and no one was learning. He's like struggling to yell.
So it's just like, yeah, kind of a situation where, I mean, in some cases it's like, probably feels a little bit like babysitting, but in other cases it's like, what would I do in that situation? It's like, put on a movie, people on chairs, like,
Yeah.
that's pretty wild. I've seen Abbott Elementary, just as like a pop cultural reference. It seems like not that far off from
Yeah. I too, when I was watching Abbott and they had the reversey toilet, I was like, oh, that can't be a thing. But then when that teacher told me that they didn't have running water at this school, I was like, okay, that makes it. Like, as really as the public school. Yeah, they demanded more resources given to like SPED departments and to hire more school counselors, because a lot of students have trauma and they deserve counselors, nurses, because our school, we don't even have a nurse. But at some of the public schools, they have like a nurse bouncing from one school to another throughout the week or day. So not really spending that much time at the school site. I think that's it for the demands that I could remember. But anyways, those 3 weeks were just really invigorating. And it was so amazing to see my students who were so involved too and really supportive of the teachers. But then, yeah, once the vote happened and they settled, the resolution was that teachers would be paid 2.5% instead of 12% more over a period of 5 years.
What?
Which, like, my cooperating teacher was like getting paid $40,000 a year. So like 2.5, yeah, no, not at all keeping up with inflation. Not even like what was affordable then. I mean, I have roommates, but she also had roommates, having been teaching for as long as she was.
There's a living wage calculator that like takes into account things like rents in different areas of the country that MIT puts out. An adult should be making at least $50,000 to just for the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in a situation like, I know I had teachers who were not only teachers, but they were also in ways therapists, in ways also helping beyond the classroom, helping to like plan events, having to like show up to all these meetings, like showing up to the Oakland Unified School Board meetings, like to check on them because they need to be checked on.
So yeah, the city was considering closing 24 of the Oakland public schools within the next 5 years. So one of the demands, which is like so relevant to this, was don't do that.
Yes.
And then I think what they ended up voting was they were going to pause for 5 months on the school closures, which was like what, till June, and then for the next school years, like
Yeah.
it was really depressing to come back after the strike, the 7-day strike.
It sounds like, yeah, like the union, it really depends on who's in the union, who has the power, who is holding the microphone,
Yeah.
decides like what.
Yeah, something like really sneaky happened the day before or the day of the vote where they were like, they settled, told media, maybe it was the union, I don't even know who it was.
This is why people like have negative views of union. Why like union membership has hit an all-time low, because there are like these bigger unions that are like, they're in the machinery of like the city politics, trying to come up themselves as people within the union. So that's a bummer. But then again, yeah, you have these people that do want something like better for the students, better for themselves. At this point, anyone that would try to tell me like, oh, teachers are paid too much, that's
Who in their right mind? I think when I was going into teaching, I was like, okay, once you get a hang of what you're teaching, maybe it does gets a little easier. I still think the amount you get paid is still low, but maybe it's like comes a little bit more like comparable. But now 4 years in, and it's still really, really hard, and I'm still working constantly, and then sleeping, and then working.
Yeah, the general vibe though, like it was awesome, man, but it was at the same time very depressing because like you said, the school was closed. But what made it cool was like the people's hopefulness, you know. As like time went by, because I wouldn't go there every time. I would go there at least once a week or twice a week, and I would stay over like security over the night. But over time, you could really tell like people's will was kind of dying out, and like people's actual wanting to keep going was dying out, and like less people were showing up. I remember one time I was like the only person in security, and then later that night somebody showed up. Who was the tall dude? Bongo? Tongo, yeah. I love that, man. He was like really cool. He played music that night, and we were just chilling. He was like playing jazz on his guitar. He was just freestyling. I was like, there's no way he's freestyling it. I recorded it. It was very beautiful, and like I appreciate those experiences. Like all those nights, I don't think like I wasted my time there. I don't feel like I was like, oh my god, where's gonna get close. Like I hold that near and dear to my heart, and it's like really grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean the bonding that you do during like these difficult struggles, I do feel like you don't come away with it being like, oh, that was a total waste of time necessarily. I don't know. Do you remember when like Occupy was happening in Oakland? And at the time, I mean, there was some really shitty things that happened there. There was some like shady shit. A lot of the aftermath was like, oh, there were actual like police posing as protesters and like that kind of thing. For those months that it was happening, I feel like there's been a reconsideration years later. Initially, like the media and even like some of the people that had been involved with it were like, you know, why did we even bother with that? But that said, participating in the occupation, like figuring out like how to organize, like out of like basically starting with nothing but people who had an idea for like something better, that connection doesn't leave you necessarily, which was maybe the positive that you can like glean from it.
Yeah. I really wish that school stayed open because like we did another sit down right at a different school, like they were also closing because they were closing a division of it. It was in West Oakland, I'm pretty sure.
It was like bilingual or multilingual. La Escuelita?
La Escuelita, yeah.
Had they been closed or were they also trying to prevent?
No, I'm pretty sure closed too. Like they got their funds taken away basically.
But then there was another school that was like on the brink of being.
Yeah. And the thing about that was like, what sucked was that, you know, we were talking to these people and like the people from La Escuelita were really passionate, you know, spoke up, and then like the people that actually like, you know, had whatever the people of the school that had, they like shut down their mics on purpose. I'm like, what the actual?
They turned yours off too? Yeah,
they turned mine off too, but I got a loud ass voice, so I just spoke up. A parent that was talking about Parker, she was just talking about like, oh, if you close down my school, where my baby's gonna like their transport, like we're in Oakland, it's not that safe. And then literally they were talking about that, shut their mic, and then she had to start yelling like, oh, you guys are heartless, you guys are ruthless. We started talking about our charter school, and I was like, no, our charter school isn't necessarily the best. You know, when these schools get closed down, the money goes to charter schools like that, and it's like not really that different, honestly. If they could have, they should have kept Parker open.
Yeah, but what you're talking about this board meeting, I mean, it is what happens when people have no investment themselves that are on the board, that are just politicians, basically. Like their next stop in their mind isn't necessarily anything to do with education. It's like, oh, they want to get to City Hall, they want to get to Sacramento to start making decisions in the legislature. They're not connected to the local schools necessarily in any way.
Like Josh Daniels. He was fired, I think, in Berkeley because it was like, he's a white supremacist. We don't feel safe with him on the school board.
Oh, yeah.
So then they like brought him on in Oakland.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if he's still there.
Yeah. I think, whoa.
I remember when we like stormed the stage and all the school board members left, I like picked up their agenda, and like one of the things on the agenda, which was not to reopen Parker or anything about Parker or during what most of the people there wanted to talk about was like, how much should we pay Josh Daniels? Should it be like $300,000?
So this is like a known racist.
Yeah, he was known. I think I even called him out. I'm pretty sure like that was like the first thing I said, yeah, y'all hiring racists, but you can't like put money into the school. I was like,
Yeah.
damn.
This is like, yeah, that Berkeley was like, yeah, we can't handle. So here you go, Oakland. But it is interesting to see like these people fail into other jobs.
Yeah.
There's like a safety net.
Yeah,
For them.
that's crazy. Dude, I swear I looked into their eyes, emotionless, nothing.
They love to use like the formalities and like, okay, well, we can't continue this discussion because the agenda, this piece of paper says we must move on. And they're getting paid to be there at this school board meeting. Like,
People need jobs. They have to make their money somehow because it's like not cheap to live in California at all. So,
Right.
People are taking time out of their days, risking to lose their jobs just to like see if they could even reopen the school for the children that they could walk to or like attend that.
yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, it shows like the dedication that people have, but the disrespect also that is held by these politicians who happen to be on the board.
I guess the one I see that was pretty cool at that board meeting was like the people on the Zoom call were like, oh yeah, we support Parker. And like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
We were being heard, like, even people that like talked about their, like, had their own agenda, like, we would like to clarify before we continue our conversation, like, oh, Parker is very awesome. And,
Yeah.
like, not awesome, but, they were just supporting, very supportive. They should know. But at the end of the day, no reopening. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's so depressing.
Yeah. They did end up, as Chelsea, I know that your article mentioned, like, there were a limited number of schools that more recently.
We're being closed.
Yeah, which is good news. I'm just going to say, like, would not have happened without all the urbanizing happening at Parker.
Yeah. So one night over the summer when I had COVID, or maybe it was when the school year started again, but the school board or like city council did hire some like private guards to go to Parker. And a couple of the people that you met were there, and they like pushed one person against the wall and she got such an intense concussion that she like was hospitalized, and then someone else also got pretty severely hurt and I think hospitalized.
It's so gross. Like, okay, you don't have money to keep the school open, but the contracts for the private security firms do not come cheap. And we're seeing that in a lot of other places, like here in SF, like Urban Alchemy, as we've talked about on the podcast. They have a $200 million contract with the city to just be an extra layer of police.
Our school, I mean, we keep getting like break-ins, but yeah, they like hired a security guard for a night, and it's like people were selling like $300 3D printers. Like, we're like paying this person hella to like protect these things that were like cheaper than hiring them.
Yeah, no, it's wild. Like, it costs about $100,000 to keep one of these people, Urban Alchemy, which is like in the Tenderloin, in the Mission. The city has contracts with this third party because the cops keep saying like, oh, we don't have the time, like we're too busy like solving crimes. We need this extra security force to like step in. I mean, it's just burning money. If you look at like, okay, how much does it cost to hire a teacher versus random security guards on the street corners in the Tenderloin? You can have so many more teachers and then get out ahead of the reasons that people commit, quote unquote, crime is because in so many cases, people don't have the bare necessities. Were there other takeaways that you all had?
I mean, I just liked it overall. Like, I just liked that people were actually like kept fighting a group of people against like a company, like OUSD, a district,
Yeah.
It was like the chances were slim, but they still fought like, pretty hard. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I liked it. I loved it. Taught me a lot about like, people's strength and willpower. So that's pretty cool. And also connections with that. Everything was just awesome, man. I loved it.
I agree. It was the most hopeful and happy that I felt since a somewhat similar like squat situation that happened in West Oakland that ended in like 2015, 16.
About Colombo.
Yeah.
QI Lumbo. Would you mind mentioning a little bit about kind of parallels between the situation at Parker and Colombo and
Actually, even just some of the same people. Like
Yeah.
I like showed up at Parker and this one person who was like pretty involved in Quilombo was like, oh, now I know this is like the right place to be because you're here.
Colombo, it was
It was like an anarchist, well, like a white anarchist squatter spot, 2009. It was called The Holdout. I don't know the exact year, maybe like 2013 or so. It became Quilombo, which was a space for Black and like brown and indigenous people in the neighborhood. It was similar to Parker in that it was like not property that the people there owned. So they weren't focused on like funding or who owned it. It was just like an autonomous space that was open for the people there to decide what would happen with it and like what is needed in the community and how it can be provided or just like developed together. So
and that includes, yeah, like even food and like, I don't know, getting to know your neighbors
Yep.
is a huge part of it. Beyond like the education itself, keeping people safe by not relying on the police, basic necessities. And in fact, like basic necessities was one of the things I know when the fundraising around the Parker fight happened, there was a huge outpouring of support. And then some of the money that was left over, is it true that that went to
the students, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, they did a lot of fundraising and then they were like, well, I guess we don't really have enough to do with these funds, so let's just give it to our students and their families.
Yeah, very transparent versus what had been happening in Oakland.
And what happens at every nonprofit in Oakland all the time.
Right. Where does the money go? Don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, it's another case where it's like, I know that Quilombo does not exist today. For the time that it did exist, certainly connections were made.
It just felt hopeful. It was like, oh, yeah, when people can do a thing without the state or a company or a nonprofit or whatever, like the most amazing things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
People are fed, people are housed, people don't use the bathroom, people can make art, people can learn from each other, people can use the space to like organize, like plan meetings, whatever. It just was
And
the
this
best
thing-
things ever.
yeah. I
The
mean, that,
mural that's still there is like my favorite mural in Oakland.
it is wild that like those things that you just mentioned are a threat to the state because they're like, well, people can like find these ways of providing for themselves and like, you know, find a community amongst themselves, building things without having to beg the state for scraps.
Which was definitely a conversation at Parker too. Like they were like, okay, we obviously don't have the capacity to like run a community school. There's just not enough people involved, although there was hope that there would be. So it was like, okay, I mean, ultimately the goal is just have Parker reopened as a public school, but everyone there knew like that what was happening at Parker was so much better than what was happening when it was like a official public school.
Yeah. Some of the schools were reopened as a result of like the pushback from the community.
But not Parker. Some neighbors were like not that into the occupation because they felt like it brought too much like cop attention to the neighborhood. But then like once it was gone, they were like, wait.
Yeah, so exactly. I'm super glad for the people that were there and, you know, that did support. It was super awesome. And like they actually like cared about the students. They actually like were happy to be there. And they were like, oh, I have to like out of my own heart, like go there. They feel forced to. They went out of their own will. And that was awesome to see.
Yeah.
They should have just let them keep the property, honestly.
Yeah. Heartened by the fact that it did go on for so long. And that, I mean, honestly, these, I think it's 6 schools were announced that they would be reopened. And that certainly would not have happened without, I think, this kind of pressure and even just making the school board and the city look really bad, bringing them a little bit of grief for all the grief that they bring to the rest of us. Anyway, I want to say thank you so much for spending a little time in San Francisco today.
Thanks for having us.
Anything you all want to plug? Can people follow you online or anything like that?
I mean, I guess I don't really got much to plug.
You want to drop your Instagram in?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because maybe I'm gonna start making some clothes. And, maybe I can pop off. That's DANI.EL51 and the actual letter O. Daniel 510. Yeah.
On Instagram.
All right. Yeah, it was fun. It was cool. And appreciate you for letting us talking. I had a good time here.
Thanks for listening to Sad Francisco, a show produced by Toshio Moronic and Caitlin Wood. We release an episode every week with bonus episodes for subscribers of the show. And if you like the show, please go to patreon.com/sadfrancisco or subscribe on the Apple Podcasts app. See you next time in Sad Francisco.